Good morning and welcome to In My Creative Classroom with Imani Cheers. My name is Emily Seamus and I work with the Adobe Education team, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to work with Imani today to facilitate this session. Uh, In My Creative Classroom is a monthly webinar series that allows us to open up the doors of the classrooms of our creative educators, our Adobe Education leaders. This is an informal session and we encourage conversation, so we invite you to share your thoughts in the chat pod and your questions for Imani at any time, and I'll make an effort to make sure those get to her attention. But we want this to be an opportunity for you to get to know Imani and uh, what is important to her as a creative person, as a creative educator, and how she brings that all to life in her classroom. Just a little housekeeping. We are going to be recording this session, so you can refer back to it later or share it with your friends. It'll be live, recorded and stored on the Adobe Education Exchange. And again, if you have any questions or want to join the conversation, please feel free to do so at any time during using the chat pods. In fact, when you have an opportunity, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Just tell us who you are and where you're from. So I'll just say right now, good morning, Imani. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. So I'll kick it off by sharing a little bit about from Imani's bio, and then we'll start our session with just a conversational interview to get to know her better. So Imani Cheers is an award-winning multimedia producer and an assistant professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. She joined George Washington in May of 2013, and before joining GW, she was the director of educational PBS NewsHour, where she managed all the educational resources for the program's website, which averages 50,000 hits per day and more than 10 million unique users. That's awesome. She also managed the show's Student Reporting Labs program, a global journalism initiative that has partnered with sites in the Middle East, Africa, and South Africa. Imani is a member of a number of professional organizations, and she was named the 2013 New Media Fellow with the International Reporting Project. As I mentioned before, she's an Adobe Education Leader, and we are just honored and delighted to have her as part of our community. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Imani Cheers.
Excellent.
And Imani, why don't we kick things off? Why don't you go ahead and just start by telling us more about you and sort of what really you're passionate about as a creative person and what brings you to the field of creative education.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Emily. Thanks for inviting me and having me on this morning. So, really, kind of basically, I go back to I've been a creative person pretty much my entire life. My father was a photojournalist for Ebony and Jet magazine. So, I grew up literally, we had a dark room in the basement of our house. And I would, watch him develop film, and his mentor was Gordon Parks, and I would, learn from the two of them really organically. So I always just grew up with this love for image making and explanation in the way in which you can use creative tools to help tell stories. And I always found it really fascinating. So as I, kind of grew up and progressed and kind of wanted to know what I wanted to do with my career, it definitely all came back to ideas of storytelling. I wanted to combine that with my love for travel and for working in sub-Saharan Africa, and was able to find a nice mix and a nice combination that allows me to do both. So I just started an organization with a colleague of mine. It's called the Global Media Project, and I can go ahead and put that link in here. Just gonna put that so you guys can sort of take a look at that. But that's a full service. It's a combination of production company to service learning projects for schools. Newsroom U, which is we'll get into some of that in a little bit. But Newsroom U is something that we just wrapped up on Monday, and that is under Global Media Project is where that came from. So I've just been really passionate about how I can help work with young people My students, even students who aren't mine, which Newsroom U wasn't, these are students who came from all over the country, and we brought them to DC for 5 days of multimedia reporting. We had a press conference at the White House with Secretary Josh Earnest. They went to see a taping of Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Just really giving them an opportunity to use digital tools to help them tell stories. So it's been a lot of fun. I love what I do. It doesn't feel like work.
That's great. So it sounds like you work with a variety of different student populations, and I was going to ask you to describe your classroom at GW. Do you want to tell us just a little bit more about the communities that you work with now, and maybe you can talk about the multiple projects, but just a little bit more about the students you're working with.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an assistant professor, as you mentioned. So I joined faculty about 3 years ago. This is actually the end of my third year, so it's been pretty fun. But I primarily teach. My core classes are Intro to Video Production. It used to be called Digital Media, but we sort of opened it up, and end up splitting that class in half. So Intro to Video Production, which is using all of the Adobe Creative Cloud, in particular Photoshop, Premiere, a little bit of Illustrator to help tell stories. And then we split that off into the new class that I just started teaching this spring. It's called Intro to Social Media and Web Production. So that is another class which we also use Illustrator, Photoshop, a little bit of Muse. Then I have an advanced reporting class, which really exciting, and I actually have that link. I believe you guys are shared. Um, so Newsroom U, we actually built this site on WordPress. So I go back and forth with my teaching, and it's really important for me to make sure that students are getting sort of real life applications. So once I started talking to my colleagues at a variety of different news outlets and other places, I found that the majority of them they were all building their sites on WordPress. So I thought it'd be really important to make sure that my students kind of understood WordPress from behind the scenes. So that's why they built this website on WordPress. It's really interesting. It's concepts of slow journalism, which is we had a partnership with the Pulitzer Center, and it was really all about instead of us being so quick to post and do this and do that with social media and how everything's so instantaneous, the students were forced. And it was hard at the beginning, but they were forced to literally just walk around Northwest DC, which is the quadrant. DC is split into four quadrants, so that's the quadrant where GW is in. And I told them to get off their phones and look up and walk around the neighborhoods. And we have an organization called Cultural DC, and they've this has been going on for about 15 years. They have all these walking trails throughout the city. So there's this total of about 15. And they were required for class to walk four of them. They could do it in a group. They could do it on the weekend. One day we took a class period and we just walked around the city. And this is an example of the infographics that the students had to do. This is probably one of my favorite ones where we looked at income disparities in two different parts of the city, Georgetown, which is pretty well known, and then Congress Heights, Georgetown being pretty affluent, predominantly Caucasian, and then Congress Heights being very working class and predominantly African American and Latino. So just putting together, and these are students who had never made infographics before. Never made infographics. Most of them had never worked and used Illustrator before, and I was so impressed with what they were able to do and the stories they were able to tell. So again, this was my advanced class. They also had to do a multimedia project. So it started with a photo essay. We kind of build in the class. Three of my classes are very kind of stair step based. So your first assignment is going to be, generally speaking, something two-dimensional, photo essay, which is very based on New York Times 1 in 8 million project. So they had to use, gather good audio, and they put all these together on Premiere and tell really interesting stories. And I was so impressed with what they were able to come up with. It was really, really, really good. Then they had to do their infographic. Then they had to do a video, and then their final project was multimedia. So it was really kind of building all those skill sets. And that's what I'm really passionate about. The way you come into the class and the way you leave the class, you should have built a series of skills throughout the 16 weeks.
That's fascinating. I loved what you're saying about slow journalism and reflection, as Remy mentioned in the chat pod. Just
Yeah.
seems like such an important step in, especially now, where communication is so fast and so um, immediate, to take a moment to actually reflect on how that fits into your life for a moment and tell a story.
Yeah, I see there's a question from Remy, so I just wanted to address that before I went on to show you guys some more work.
Great.
So in particular, in my intro to digital media class, or excuse me, video production course, they're all freshmen. So they're very novice. Most of them have never had a production course before. Some of them, I will say, depending on obviously the school districts and programs they came from, they might have been working on their school newspaper. Every now and then, I get a student who their school might have a television program, and maybe they're producing like the morning news. They might even be working with their sports teams, and they're producing kind of behind the scenes weekend wrap ups of different sports events that have happened. And then so it's a combination to answer your question, Remy, it's a combination. By the time my seniors come in, I am pretty adamant about that. They need to have taken at least 3 to 4 other production classes before they come to the advanced course, because it is very quick. We don't have time to necessarily teach story structure and all the other things that I really focus on in my intro class. They should know this by that. At this point, like, let's go. Now we're really going to get in and we're going to focus on finding characters. And so it's literally the evolution of basic production principles in that intro class to then we're working on, as I mentioned, finding characters, getting out in the community. I force them to talk to strangers, not just email people and ask questions. It's like, you need to go somewhere. You need to knock on a vendor's door. Who's your manager? I'm interested in learning about this business. I force my kids, and I teach at a very affluent university in a very affluent part of town. But there are a number of issues and income disparities that are going on in Washington, D.C. at the moment. We most recently became one of the most expensive cities in the country to live in. Not really any, I guess it's better than being murder capital of the country like we used to be, but still, those are some of the titles that aren't overwhelmingly positive because it comes with so many other issues. So I've been really passionate about getting my very privileged, very white kids out of Northwest, out of this little bubble that's GW, and I get them into other parts of the city. And I go with them, and I challenge them to ask questions about gentrification and to make themselves, most importantly, a little uncomfortable, and maybe the character that they're working with a little uncomfortable too. But that's what being a true digital storyteller is about. It's about pushing your boundaries and getting uncomfortable. And so far, it's worked out pretty well.
Wow, I want to take your class.
Come on over. It's a good
All
time.
right. Great. Well, let's actually shift into your presentation. I have a lot of other questions I could ask, but I know that you have a really rich presentation for the group, and I want to invite them to keep asking questions as well. You want to shift over and start the share part of your session?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. And I actually, very quickly, sorry guys, I'm going to go in here. I just want to pull up those. So I had 2 slate pieces that I wanted to share as well. So if you don't mind, sorry about that, guys. I just want to get these up. Okay.
Great.
So I'll start with a program. I'll start with a video um, that my advanced class did. This was fall of 2014 at this point. So I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the concept of Adobe Anywhere. Maybe, perhaps, some
You can
people.
let us know in the chat box if you are.
Yes, if you are, let me know. But Adobe Anywhere is an option in your Adobe programs that allows you to work collaboratively. And I'm not going to explain too much because I think the video we put together explains very well. But in particular, Adobe came to George Washington in the summer of 2014 saying, hey, we have this new collaborative option. It's in beta right now, but we would love to get some real, time application and help us kind of work out some of these kinks before we roll it out to the larger population. So when in doing that, my class in particular sort of took on learning this program, and I'll just play you this quick video of what we learned.
Great.
It allows me. There we go. All right.
Imani, I don't think your screen is shared quite yet.
Oops. Sorry.
Wrong. Sorry about that. We were on the wrong screen. I think we're in the right place now.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought I was still shared. Yes?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So can everyone see this? The Vimeo page? Okay. All right. Let's try this again.
Okay. Tell me first, which video are you showing?
The Adobe Anywhere behind the scenes.
I think it's this one. This one?
Yes.
Is an online journalism magazine coming out of the George Washington University that focuses on local, national, sports, and campus news. It's run by students, for students, and we're doing all of the website design, multimedia content, writing. Collaboration is the future of journalism. And what Adobe Anywhere does is take a fantastic editing tool and build collaboration.
I really like that it gives me the freedom to experiment and how to get my hands dirty with all the different methods of multimedia journalism.
I can eat top ramen on my couch and work on a Premiere project while someone else is maybe across the world or across campus where they may be doing the same thing. I mean, no one's going to complain about that.
Journalism happens in hyperspeed. So now when I take a video, I can edit that video, share it with someone in the studio. They can.
Oh no. Oh, not sure why that's up.
You can upload it, put it on TV, make it online.
I think using Adobe Anywhere is a dream come true for this class, especially because since we all are on different schedules, we don't have.
Oh, sorry about that. And my mic was muted. I wanted to ask you if you could try muting your mic as well, so we can test whether we can eliminate an echo we're hearing.
On an airplane, I think that's amazing because you can just do your work wherever you are.
And who knows what we'll do in the future. The workshop is full of creative people doing creative things.
Okay, sorry about those couple of issues. We'll make sure for the next video we don't have those problems. So thanks for your patience. But yeah, so that's one piece that we did, my students, which was a lot of fun. Sort of moving forward, I'd love to share. I think a lot of people do also. So in my web class this semester, brand new course, I had them do an assignment using Slate. Because I don't know if anyone's familiar with Slate. But it's a really fun, really quick tool, brand new Adobe tool that allows students and people to make really perfect and compelling, I shouldn't say perfect, really compelling and really interesting digital stories sort of quickly. So using text and photos, and you can use audio. So this is one of them in particular by a former student, Quinn Scanlon. Really cool. She was able to put in a number of photos that she had done. She had manipulated all of these on Photoshop and made these really interesting sort of triptychs, these like personality triptychs things that I just thought were so interesting and engaging. And it's just, I thought it was awesome. So they had to tell me about themselves and using a slate option. So I thought it was great. So that's one. That's twins.
Would you like me to share my screen to display that?
I thought you guys could see that. Clearly you can't.
Here we are now.
Yes, well here's the link. That's Quins, so there's that link. Sorry, I'm like talking about it thinking you guys can see me.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, so there's Quinn. I threw the link in chat also, so you guys can take a look at it at your convenience. Here's another one that is done by Becca, who's another student of mine, Becca Melville. So I really liked hers. Yeah, Jeff, you gotta love hers. Quinn, who's great. But yeah, Becca did the same thing. So the whole idea was that the students had to introduce themselves. Like, who are you? What do you do? What makes you uniquely amazing? Which I'm always telling them that, there might be somebody who is, understands the programs better and who does everything. But my big thing is really work ethic, right? Like, I want you guys to work hard. No one can ever say that they out-prepared or outworked you. Someone might be more creative in whatever definition of creativity, or someone might be more better versed in a certain program, but no one should ever be able to beat you or best you when it comes to your work ethic and how much energy you put into your assignments. Because if you're putting in your best, then hopefully you are receiving that back, which I think for the most part they get and they do well. So those are two slate projects that they did. I thought they were those two in particular were really successful and really good examples of what my students have been able to do. Then another one, sort of moving forward, our newsroom U. So that is, there's our newsroom U site. This is a site that, as I mentioned, we built this weekend. And actually, if can you play the behind the scenes video? You can either play it from here, it's all the way at the bottom, or it's like the last one. You scroll all the way down.
I'm going to just go to another screen. I have one ready to go for us.
The really fun thing about Newsroom U, and I'm still sort of, I'm still kind of coming back to reality from it. It's like a lot going on. But I can say that it was really impressive that we were able to sort of pull all of this together, get everything sort of moving and working, and we did it in like 7 weeks. Like, I came up with the idea. I fundraised and raised $17,000 from funders that were allowed to support the students, get them out here, and then in the course of the weekend, we produced over 35 pieces of original content. So I was very happy with our work, what the students were able to do. And if you click on the Newsroom U site, as I said, you can sort of go ahead and take a look at our behind the scenes video, which I think does a very good job at telling what we did. So
that's great. Would you like me to show that video now?
Please.
All right.
I'll throw that link in there also.
Newsroom U is this awesome multimedia weekend where you're getting to collaborate with students from across the country from all different colleges and backgrounds, and getting to produce stories about what millennials care about.
They've seen it, they've probably had internships where they've been in newsrooms, but never really ones where they are the reporters. So it's really an opportunity to give college and high school students a unique experience where they get to be working professional journalists.
I am producing a multimedia package on undocumented students here in the U.S. A lot of them have the lack of resources to progress, even though it technically is not their fault that they are here in the country. A lot of the decisions that their parents made were based on bettering their futures. The first gentleman we interviewed, he is an immigrant from Mexico who was brought here at 2 months of age. He basically just studied online. He wanted to learn how to make his own web pages and build his own website, so he Googled on YouTube until he finally figured it out after a year, and now that's what he's doing for an organization called United We Dream.
Personally, I was able to relate to that because I am the only person in my family who is a U.S. citizen. Both my parents are still immigrants, as well as my sisters. They have yet to be documented. Being here in Washington, D.C. is incredible exposure just to see what it's actually like, because there's so many stories out there and you just have to go out and find them, and being with Newsroom U, it gives you the opportunity.
It helps us as individuals to grow, because that's the real world. You're not always going to know everyone. You're not going to be working with your best friends. You're going to be out there meeting new people, and I think it's great.
It's not a 2 to 3 week workshop. This is not a summer school class, where you can, get it together after week 3. You got to have it together at the end of day 1.
I mean, I've kind of run into roadblocks, but nothing that I wasn't expecting from, as a journalist. Finding sources is always, a road to get up. That's kind of, when you get your sources, they make your story.
That's probably been the hardest thing, because people, don't really contact you back in time, and then you're racing against time.
I had a moment when I was trying to email someone from the NRA, and then one of my peers said, "Oh, their office isn't that far from there. We can go visit." And that idea never popped into my head, because I'm just used to the NRA as a concept. But being here in the Capitol where things are happening, and just the access that I have to people here is amazing.
They have to be versatile. They have to be able to produce on multiple platforms, and the more experience they get at that, the better chance they'll have of being hired someplace.
I think it's always really important just to develop a lot of different perspectives and hear from a lot of different, teachers and professors who can give you a different insight into how things can or should be done.
Well, I believe Newsroom U is just an opportunity for young journalists or young students to work in Washington for a weekend and figure out what the issues are.
What's unique about it is that there's 23 college students, but there's 2 high school students as well. So it's collaborative across ages, skill levels, and it's a great way to learn from one another.
I'm actually covering the press conference that we did yesterday. So I asked the press secretary about the gap between millennial voters and other demographics.
This is my first year ever voting, and I think that being able to hear about the issues that I'm going through, and that somebody actually cares about what I'm going through, it helps reaffirm my trust and confidence in the government and what the whole process stands for.
I think these kinds of projects make journalism seem like a more viable profession for people of color. A lot of times, if you're watching from the other side of the screen and you may not see yourself represented, you may wonder who is behind the scenes, who's making those decisions. But when you come into this kind of program and realize that you can have agency and you can be a change maker, I think it empowers students to start to think about what kind of stories they want to be able to tell and what kind of leadership positions they may want to assume when they enter the profession.
Okay, so thank you. So that was, and just to answer some of those questions again, but it was really something. It's challenging being a Black woman, being a journalist, being an educator, and wanting to make sure that our students have, in particular, minority students, first generation students, students of color, have these types of opportunities. So we really wanted to provide a program that I can tell you a good, I don't know, probably a third of them wouldn't have been accepted into, maybe potentially more prestigious programs because they just haven't had the experience. They go to schools and they work in programs that don't have the resources like we have at GW. Annie Shugart, who was great, she did a really powerful piece on a National Prayer Day. She goes to Harvard, so she has great opportunities. We had some students, at Syracuse and other places. But then we have some students that go to schools and programs where they don't have access to DSLRs. And we were so fortunate that not only was Adobe a major sponsor, but we also got Canon. Canon sent 10 camera kits for the weekend. So students who did not have their own DSLRs were in, and we didn't have to utilize GW's equipment. GW helped with sponsoring us with space, and they provided, of course, my department, they provided tripods and shotgun mics and lav mics. But it was Canon that came through with almost $65,000 worth of equipment that they loaned us for the weekend. So students who didn't have and had never worked with, the Canon 5D Mark II had an opportunity to use it this weekend to tell their story. So we really want to make sure that, for me, I'm all about just leveling the playing field. Half the time with most of these kids, it's not that they don't have the ability. It's not that they don't have the will or the drive or the interest. They just don't have the opportunity. And if you don't give them the opportunity, then how are we ever going to level the playing field? So give them a chance. And as you can see, and I encourage you all to check out the site and look at some of the stories, I think you'll be really pleasantly surprised at what they have been able to do.
It's interesting that the point that you make about bringing these resources to the students and leveling the playing field. And Remy had posted an interesting question. As your students are entering these projects and these classes, are there other resources and websites that you leverage to help them build the skills that they need in order to do these projects?
Yeah, and I threw the intro there. So GW, we have a partnership with lynda.com. I'm sure you all are very familiar with Lynda and the sort of online resources that they have. We use a lot of Adobe TV. I utilize a lot of the Education Exchange resources. So yeah, I mean, the big thing is, I take in particular the intro class, I take it slow, right? I take it slow. We're teaching basic principles. And then by the time they get to, come back and see me, hopefully in 2, if not 3 years as seniors or either, late juniors, then I allow them to come back in the class and then, we've learned a lot. But as I had mentioned, before, I'm really passionate about improving my own personal skill set. So I take my professional development very serious, which is part of the reason why I wanted to join the Adobe Education Leaders, because the only way that I'm going to be a valuable resource to my students is if I am up to date and also up to par to teach them these very powerful, yet some of them very complex programs. And I know Adobe makes it a point to try to make them obviously very user-friendly, but I want to go above and beyond kind of teaching the basics, right? This is how you open up, Premiere, and this is how you throw clips on a timeline. But I'm really into sort of the next step at this point in my career, and how can I push them? I have them for 75 minutes a class. We meet twice a week for 16 weeks. How can I maximize that class time and give them the skill sets that far reaching from after they leave my class, they'll continue to be able to be successful.
Do you have any suggestions or favorite resources that you use in terms of your own professional and creative development?
Not other than what I mentioned. So yeah, as I said, Lynda is a great, I use Lynda again for myself. I use the Exchange. I'm always sort of scouring through and looking at, what my colleagues have posted. And that's been a great thing for me. As I mentioned, this is the end of my 3rd year in the program. So I've been really passionate about, we also have a partnership with Future Media Concepts. I'm not sure if that's, something that everyone else has, but they allow you to do professional development with a number of Adobe programs as well as, Final Cut Pro and some other stuff. To answer Jeff's question, do I think we need to start earlier? Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was working at the PBS NewsHour and it was my job to, to turn daily news content into a curriculum, and it was all about media literacy. And everyone was like, well, how young should we go? And I'm like, we should be starting in kindergarten. Like, kindergartners should be to understand what news is current events, and to be aware and everything. It could be something as simple as, what's the weather outlook, for the day or for the weekend. It's Friday, right? What's the weather going to look like for the next couple of days? That's news. What season is it? I have a 2-year-old, and I'm going to take him strawberry picking. So, what's newsworthy is kind of anywhere and everywhere around us. And I think it's important for us to start young and start working and collaborating definitely with, elementary and secondary teachers. I do know, for the most part, as I said, depending on when my students come to me, I get a wide variety. So I get the students who have never touched any aspect of digital storytelling before. They have no idea what Premiere or any Adobe projects are. And then I have the students that were fortunate enough to come from a school district, and particular school, that might have had some more resources. So maybe they had a really robust student newspaper, whether it be still in print or online. I had a couple of students who, you get a sprinkle, right? 1 or 2 here and there, whose schools had a really robust television program. So they were producing, the morning news, and they were working with shooting video content, and literally putting on television programs. And they had been doing that for, since they were freshmen in high school. So by the time they get here 4 years later, they're sort of my pros in the game. And when they do come with that experience, I push them. I'm like, you have to take this required course, but since you are more advanced, I expect your work to be that much better because you've been doing this for 4 years, right? Like, you understand when I talk about rule of thirds and, a lot of my sort of photography principles that I bring in, composition and framing and, story arc and development. And you need to have strong characters in your pieces and, a strong beginning, middle, and end, all that stuff. And even going through, if you don't mind, Emily, could you go back to the Newsroom U site? I'd love to show a short piece.
Sure. In fact, you want to try sharing your screen and then you can drive?
Not a problem.
Yeah, there we go. And I'll monitor the questions and keep.
Excellent. So as I said before, here's our site. And a really good piece that I'm just so proud of is this one. So I'll play, this is sort of we don't like to give winners, but if there was a winner, this would have definitely taken probably one of the top places. So I'm going to, play that. Let me know if there's any issues.
The first semester of my freshman year, I was raped on campus by another student who was also involved in the student association and was a member of Greek life. Well, some friends of mine noticed that something was off, especially because he had been talking about that night in a very different way than what actually happened. So I hadn't told anyone that anything had happened at all, yet he was saying we had this encounter, implying that it was consensual, and I reported 6 months later and went through the entire reporting and investigation process with the university. I had a hearing, and I worked pretty closely with the administration at that point and beyond. I felt pretty alone in that process, and I knew that we had the Students Against Sexual Assault group, so I got involved to get support and also as a vehicle for advocacy, because they're a really big advocacy organization.
It's on us. The idea is to fundamentally shift the way we think about sexual assault.
This administration has worked so hard on campus sexual assault. Joe Biden has worked so hard on campus sexual assault, and the It's On Us campaign has been amazing, really bringing so much out there that people didn't talk about, schools didn't talk about, and it'll be sad to see them go, and it'll be interesting to see if that gets handed off, or if maybe it gets continued outside of the administration. No matter what, no matter who wins, I'm just worried that it's not going to have the same traction anymore.
So that was one. So really loved that piece. Just so powerful, again, sort of students being able to kind of go out and find really interesting stories. I got another one for you, which I thought was great. James Villalobos, who you saw in the other piece, or behind the scenes piece. James is a powerhouse. I have never seen someone. This kid forgoes spring breaks. He forgoes all sorts of activities, so he can go out and tell stories. So he can go out and tell stories. It's amazing. It's amazing. So I'm not even going to talk anymore about him. I'm just going to play his piece because you're gonna hear this name in the very near future.
Kevin Davenport Jr. of Oakland, California, was among 2,300 students who graduated from Howard University Saturday. Unlike many of his peers, he is graduating with 0 loans. Now with a degree in political science, he has accepted a job with California Senator Dianne Feinstein and hopes to work on education reform.
Cost of education is absurd, and it's absolutely absurd. And we're talking about higher education, education all around.
Cameron Williams is still trying to figure out how he will be paying back his $23,000 in debt.
Spraying the guy, bro, and just trying to stack money, bro. That's it, for real. I don't really have a payment plan or anything yet.
Kendra Gibbons graduated with a degree in healthcare management, and she will owe over $40,000 in debt.
We shouldn't leave this place knowing that we're going to be in full debt when it's like we put so much work in. It's like we're just here to better our future and the next generation,
But Kevin Davenport Jr. hopes to make a change in the system.
Now that I've gotten hip to a lot of federal government, I'm able to understand a lot of its flaws and my place in it and the way I can make a difference.
At Howard University in Washington, D.C., I'm James Villalobos, Newsroom U.
So as you can see, that was amazing. James literally went out. He didn't have a press pass. He didn't have access. And he went to campus. And although he found these stories by standing out and talking to people, which is exactly what we want our students to do. So it was really exciting. I was really, really, really proud of him. Let me see. Everybody still here? Any questions? I can't see you guys.
Remy presented an interesting question. He said, you talk about privilege as it relates to race and class in your classrooms, but also in the communities you and your students interact with. How do you approach and teach concepts of cultural competency within your course?
It's a lot of things. And this might sound slightly simple and facetious, and if it does, I apologize. But a lot of it starts with sort of day one when students take my class. I'd probably say about 85% of my students, and that's probably low, really for more like 90, have never had an educator of color outside of a athletic coach, maybe a PE teacher. But the majority of GW's student base, again, very affluent. So they've never seen a Black person, in particular a Black person with a Black woman with a PhD. And I like to consider myself fairly young, like I just turned 36. So our department is predominantly older, like 55, 60 up, white men. So when they see me and I'm in front of the classroom, like right there off the bat, we're going to be discussing a lot of issues. The examples that I show, I'm always, and I'm so grateful. 2 years ago, I did the Train the Trainer program through AEL, which was amazing because it really helped me as a, it's one thing to be an educator, it's another thing to be like a truly like an academic, right? Sitting in your classroom, putting together lesson plans. And that course gave me so many amazing tips, techniques, and skill sets about how am I supposed to structure my class? How do I, like, what is my time period? I got 75 minutes, so what am I doing? So in every class, I'm very much so, and they know this from day one. I make a Prezi. We review concepts. I show them examples, then we do it. It's like, here, we're going to talk about some things. I normally take that like 15, 20 minutes and I show examples. So where we discuss this cultural competency, the examples I show, I'm always looking for whether they be news clips or video clips. And the fun thing even now with like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and all these other things, I can find so many interesting and short, right? I don't have time to show, and every now and then I do. But it's difficult to show like a 60 minutes clip, right? Those pieces are anywhere between 8 and like 15 minutes long, or even a Vice News clip, which is like 15, 20, sometimes even 30 minutes long. I don't have time to do that. So when I can show a short, compelling, interesting piece from Now This News or from AJ Plus, some of these other news, Huffington Post, these other news sources that are based on the web and put these really cool, compelling packages together in like a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes. It allows us to have conversations about things that I could stand up here and talk to you about what it's like to be a double minority in this country. But that's very self-serving, right? It's not about me. It's about you. And I want to make sure that you, maybe you think about something different. In the fall, we did a lot of stuff around misinformation about the Syrian war and refugees. Right? I realized in the news, hell, I was confused with half of the things I was hearing, and I consider myself very well informed. So I was like, I can only imagine what my students are going through. You hear something over here, you hear something over here. Refugees are terrorists. This is this. We're seeing what happened in San Bernardino. We're seeing this. We're hearing political candidates, presidential candidates, talk about banning entire ethnic and religious groups from coming into this country. Like, time out. How can we sift through all of this information? And Ezra Klein had put together a really cool, and it was basically like a 6-minute infographic that sort of explained the history of this current Syrian conflict, right? Where does this come from? How did it happen? Who are these people who are fleeing? Where are they going? Why are they going here? What's happening in their home country? And I had so many emails and comments afterwards where students were like, wow, Dr. Cheers, like, thank you. Like, and I didn't say anything. I actually did not say anything. I just sifted through all of the media that they're bombarded with, and I found something that was accurate, something that was compelling, engaging, interesting, right? Because it's this whole infographic thing. It's not just, again, I could stand there and talk about Syria for forget 6 minutes, 6 hours, and they probably still wouldn't understand the difference. But looking at the way we are as digital storytellers, how we use images and sound and video and put it together to explain something that on the one hand is really, really complex and really, really confusing for the average person. And again, my students are fairly informed, but it was great. It was a really good way to discuss a sensitive, complex issue. This was also like right after Paris, like Paris, San Bernardino, like right, all of that hit kind of within a month. And I knew they were concerned and I knew they were scared, and you could sort of see it on their face. And it was one of those things where, you know, I have the luxury in my classes that I can bring up and talk about things that most professors necessarily can't, right? When you're teaching stats or you're teaching like research methods and theory, you don't have the flexibility that I have. Depending on what's happening in the news and what's going on and what I think my students, should know or should be more informed of, I can just find a clip and do that, right? That's really, really nice. Plus, because I am teaching college versus K through 12, then I even have more flexibility, right? I can discuss a complex issue that if I was at, either another university or teaching another demographic of student, I don't think I would have the ability to be so open with it, which is also really, really nice.
Wow. You touched on something that I was curious about. It sort of builds on this last question, but do you have other opportunities to collaborate with other professors and bring them into your classroom or share some of your techniques? You're obviously very collaborative in the larger creative world and with Adobe and in your projects. I'm just wondering if the work that you're doing is having an impact in other areas of your campus with your colleagues.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do. I actually work closely. I'm actually cross-listed. I'm cross-listed in women's studies, African studies, gender studies, and culture studies. And international affairs, which just got added. So I'm cross-referenced and resourced as an affiliate faculty member in about 8 other departments on campus. And a lot of that is because, our dean and some other people have realized that we're doing more over here than just playing in Photoshop, which sometimes I'm pretty convinced that's what people think that I do. I just sort of like play with pictures and like cut up a little video here or there. And I'm like, sometimes, but for the most part, I'd like to think I'm doing something a little more interesting than that. But we get the opportunity to work. Here's our students, if you guys can see. Our little fun group. We made some cool GIFs, kind of little mini bios about all of them. Um, but yeah, it's been really important for me to make sure that I do a number of, not only do I obviously teach these platforms and these programs in my classes, but I work with my colleagues. I actually, between us and obviously whoever listens to this, I've actually set up a program for our maintenance staff, and twice a month, all of our maintenance staff and our individuals, many of them, most of them people of color, many of them, do not have higher level degrees, and I teach them Photoshop and Premiere and digital storytelling.
Excellent. Oh, that's great. Looks like we have a couple other. Jeff's question is, how do you do everything?
I don't know. I don't sleep a lot. I will tell you that. And my son could probably agree. I don't sleep very much. I do have a 2-year-old, as I mentioned. Things can be a little crazy. But as I said from the very beginning, when you're doing, I'm a firm believer, when you are living your purpose, when you're doing what you know you are designed to do, it doesn't feel like work. I don't feel like, as much as I'm crazed and tired and clearly do not get enough sleep every day and probably drink way too much coffee. Um, I'm overjoyed when I get emails from my students that say, as I did from Newsroom U on Tuesday, because of the program this weekend, I know what I want to do, or this was the most amazing experience in my academic career, or I have a student who was a senior. No other professor would let him, he wasn't in the School of Media and Public Affairs, and no other professor would allow him to take the Intro to Video production class. And he graduated. He graduates tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So in January, he came to me and was like, I have tried to take it at like 3 other local universities. No one else will take it. Is there any way you can squeeze me in your class? I've asked every other professor. They've said no. Um, and I looked at him and I was like, my department chair is probably going to yell at me because I'm not supposed to be adding extra kids in the class, and I was already maxed out. Um, but the answer is yes. And this morning, I got the nicest, I got a little weepy. I got the nicest card from him that basically said, because you allowed me in your class, because you helped me learn some of these digital tools, I now can say that my collegiate career is complete. It's the one class he wanted to take, and no one else would let him take it. And what for me was, and he did, he was like, it was probably insignificant for you to sign me in, but because of that, you've given me the skill set so that I can continue to do what I love to do. And it's messages like that, it's moments like that, it's when I see our website, it's when I look at our behind the scenes videos, that really makes everything worth it.
I'm seeing the words that are going through my mind popping up in the chat pod. Wow, and amazing. This really, I mean, that story gives me goosebumps just hearing it and realizing the impact that one act could have on a student's career is just, it really is inspiring.
Yeah, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel good.
Yeah. We are getting close to the top of the hour, unfortunately. Time flies when you're having a fascinating conversation. So I just wanted to invite the group one more time. If there's any closing questions you'd like to ask Imani, please feel free to post them um, in the chat box. And and if there's anything in closing you'd like to say in a moment, I'm just going to shift over to a feedback screen, but our questions in our chat will follow us. So you can tell us
Yes.
a little bit about how you felt about the session and continue to post questions to Imani before we close.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to see them, and I don't know what I did to my Connect screen. I would have been responding.
Oh, I've been trying to read them for you, so that's all right.
Okay, right. I'm like, my Connect screen is doing something weird. But yes, if anyone has any other questions, or as I said, please, if you get a moment, the two websites, my students, my Northwest Now as well as Newsroom U, take a look at the work. I think it's pretty impressive. In particular, like this one by Simone. I mean, she's a senior in high school. um, like Simone's a senior in high school, first generation American. Just, all these kids are just outstanding. Mora, just all of them is just really, really, really exciting to see their work and what they do. And it's awesome. It's awesome. I saw a question. Any words of advice, educator inspiring to? I didn't see the rest of that.
To help students use their digital voice.
Oh wow, yeah. I'm always my first question to my students is always, what drives you? What are you passionate about? What gets you up in the morning, but also keeps you up late at night? Um, Hone in on that, whatever that may be. Hone in on that. Um, Honor that. Explore that. And don't be afraid. I'm slightly envious of these millennials because they have so many cool tools at their fingertips. And part of me is like, man, if all this would have been out 15 years ago, what could you have done? But it's such an exciting time for them. So my big thing is always find something you love, find something you're passionate about, and then just go for it. Like whatever you can do, however you can make your mark. My students have to do an advocacy project in all of my classes. I encourage them. I'm really big on media that matters, right? There's so much crappy media out there. I'm like, be the other side of that. Be the people who literally focus on media that matters, stuff that is important and impassioned. And I don't care if that's. I had students who did stuff on everything from Free Israel to stop banning pit bulls. It ran the gamut to Black Lives Matter to Trans Lives Matter. It ran the gamut of absolutely everything, and I loved it. And when they presented their work, I was so excited um, to see them kind of come alive. Right, the assignments. I'm always about don't make assignments that are just kind of these frivolous assignments, but something that they can hopefully they can learn something from, and they're better after they completed the work. Is what I've always seen is really powerful.
Well, thank you so much, Imani. I just want to take a moment to say again, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. I know the group that's here in the room has enjoyed it, and everyone who watches this recording is going to get a lot out of it as well. On that note, I'm actually going to just say goodbye to our recorded guests and turn off the recording, but I'm going to keep the room open for a couple more minutes in case there are any other questions with the folks who are here with us today. So thanks again, and the room will be open for a few more minutes if you'd like to ask Imani any other questions. For our guests, thank you for joining us, and please consider joining us for another session of In My Creative Classroom in the future.
Thank you for having me.